What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 14 Iya, Chapter 279,277. I got lost a little bit and came here. For subscription, for monthly pass, for reward. Advertisement. Luffy sat aside, clutching his head and grinning, sugarcoating him with medicine. Although Lucas only used the back of the knife to hit Luffy, he still collected a lot of strength, but no matter how much strength he collected, the gap between them was also very large. Lucas walked to Sanji, holding a knife in both hands, and 8 swords in his hair. Sanji waved his hand again and again, he didn't want to be beaten. If you don't want to be beaten, you have to be beaten. Lucas catches Sanji just as a beating, with a good name, teaching brother. The warship sailed slowly, and Lucas began to happily teach his brother and his subordinates a good time. After all, let these people suffer more and suffer more from his hands, it is better than encountering a strong one and being killed in the future. If you sweat more at this time, you can save your life later. It's better to improve your strength quickly than to scream and scream to rely on the plug-in to be real. The weather on the sea has changed. Dark clouds cover the sky, the waves on the sea are no longer calm, and the waves are getting bigger and bigger. And in front of their warship, a large stretch of mist shrouded in an endless stream, engulfing the ship directly. It's so thick, I can't see anything that is too far away at all. Sanji said from the edge of the hull. The cloud of mist drifted in just now, and the end of the stretch enveloped their boat, and now they can't find a direction when they want to go out. But for Lucas, it's okay to want to go out. And Luffy sat at the bow of the ship completely heartlessly, shaking his feet and singing his idiot song. Well, he looks happy and loves, just the not so smart as he. Lucas grabbed Luffy's fate on the back of his neck and put him on the railing aside. Your kid is too much. Lucas has been in this special seat for so many years, and the kid will grab his special seat as soon as he gets on the boat. Hey, Luffy rubbed his head, and the eldest brother changed the ground for himself. Looking eagerly at the seat of big brother Lucas, that is the throne he lost. Heartache hurts. At the same time, at the edge of this mist, a young green-haired man in a small boat looked around and looked at the sea under the boat. I couldn't see anything clearly, and the mist was half-armed out, and because there was no light in the mist, the sea was dark and unclear. The young man breathed and grasped the hilt of the knife on his waist. If someone was here, he would find that there were 3 knives hanging from the young man's waist, which turned out to be 3 swords. Advertisement. Zoro has no companions. He was originally a bounty hunter in East Blue. Ishin pursues stronger strength and hopes that one day he can challenge Hawkeye Mahawk and become the world's #1 swordsman. He is not afraid to get into the mist by mistake. He is a fan of East Blue alone. It's nothing after all these years of training in East Blue. Recently, I have finally found the upside down mountain and came to the Grand Line. I have been lost since I was a child. First, I got lost in the Ishin Kendo Hall of the Master, and then I went to visit my teacher. Then he went out to sea again, lost his way for many years, no matter where he floated. This is all floating on the Grand Line, what is he afraid of? Zoro took out the wine bottle, pulled out the stopper with a bang, filled the wine, and sighed comfortably. This is a good life. Part of the bounty he got was invested in the maintenance of weapons, most of it was invested in drinking, and part of the bounty he got was prepared to have a chance to buy a famous knife. The rest is for food, after all, sometimes you can hunt on the spot on an island. Wow, there was the sound of sea water in his ears, and Zoro slowly rowed the boat. Someone once suggested that he learn sailing skills, but Zoro touched his head and gave up. Sometimes running can turn on the spot, the super big road idiot, sailing. Dreaming. Well, Zoro's boat has turned several turns in the mist. Without Nami's help, poor Zoro, tut. Not everyone can take Suoda away with just a few words. After all, in East Blue, several pirates who wanted to fool Zoro were cut off by him to receive the bounty. Speaking of 3 heads, on the other side of the foggy area. A pirate ship rushed directly into the mist in panic. After that, a small coffin-shaped boat slowly approached, and the imposing eagle-eyed Mahawk sat on the boat with Erlang's legs tilted. There is a small cross on his neck, which is actually the smallest knife. And behind him is his black knife. One of the 12 knives of the supreme knives, the Knight of the Black Sword. A pair of eagle-like eyes stared at the mist, the eagle's eyes opened up, perceiving the pirate ship, and chased in with a smile. A joke, seeing his Hawkeye Mahawk rowing at night with a black knife, the group of pirates also screamed. It is true that Hawkeye can't find a reason if they don't want to kill them. It just so happens, take these guys to relieve boredom. Advertisement. Hawkeye's head suddenly lifted, his sharp eyes seemed to be able to break through the mist, and he looked closely in one direction. Interesting. He perceives a strong opponent. Hawkeye found greater fun, and directly gave up these small fish and shrimps, drew out the black knives behind, swung several knives quickly, several powerful chopping waves broke through the fog, and penetrated the front with the sound of breaking through the air. Pirate ship in the mist. After solving this group of guys, Hawkeye moved towards the unknown opponent with great curiosity. But well, Hawkeye put the black knife away and restored Erlang's legs, his head slightly lowered, and he reached out and grabbed his hat, posing as a master lonely, drifting in that direction slowly. Wow, there was the sound of paddling in the ear, and the eagle eye was not far away. A young man with a 3-handed knife hung around his waist was passing by a small boat not far from him. The other party obviously didn't understand hockey, didn't perceive his existence, and the obstruction of the fog made people unable to see the surroundings clearly. Hawkeye's fan, challenger, and half of the apprentice in the future, just crossed with him. Hawkeye didn't realize there was something, but he felt a little bit surprised at the opponent's three-sword style. He continued to maintain the demeanor of a master, letting the boat drift slowly towards the warship. And Zoro drank a while and got on the boat for a while. What he didn't know was that he inadvertently turned a few times, and Kabuto turned around and passed by Hawkeye's boat. Once, twice, 3 times. Hawkeye is so dumbfounded, this person has a big problem. Even though he was in the mist, in his perception, this guy had been fascinated several times. It was a very blunt one, and most people couldn't do it. I just swiped a bit forward and turned a corner, this. Actually, the fog is not a big problem for Lucas and Hawkeye. This is why Zoro is really lost. Hawkeye's cold temperament was almost amused by this tease. Fortunately, he was close to that warship. Hawkeye and Lucas had already sensed the existence of each other, and he came to the warship, ready to compete with Lucas. Lucas and Hawkeye heard the sound and looked at the approaching boat under the warship together. The green was so conspicuous. Chapter 280,278. 3 swords. Fight against Hawkeye. For subscription. For monthly pass. For reward. Advertisement. Lost. Lucas looked at the green-haired youth on the boat, amused. A swordsman with 3 swords on his waist, a little handsomer than him. And who can control the handsome mess with green hair, who else besides Suoda? If he watched anime in his previous life, Luffy would give him a feeling of burning TM. That soda is. I'll go. He drew his sword. So handsome. Love. The characters in the Straw Hat group have their own characteristics, and many people like them very much, but if you really want to choose a favorite, it is still the 3-sword style Zoro. After all, playing with knives is every boy's favorite. In my previous life, when I was young, I took a wooden knife carved by my uncle and hit the grass on the side of the road. I always dreamed of a world like swords and knives. Games with such materials are even more expensive. Unfortunately, after being reborn, he accidentally ate a devil fruit and was no longer a pure swordsman. Now his strength is very strong, and the favor he once had for Suoda is slowly changing, hoping that Suoda can go down his path and become the first among pure swordsmen. Ah, yes, Zoro nodded. There was not much food and water on his boat, and the bottle of wine just dried him. However, this man is so amazing, how does he know that I am lost? There was a little problem with fate, and Suoda did not encounter the bear child incident of King Menka axe again, so he was not wanted. It's okay to get on a warship and ask for help. Lucas asked Zoro to board the warship and threw him a bottle of wine. Zoro caught the thrown bottle, somewhat delighted. Zoro, just like that, kendo, famous swords, wine. If he fell asleep, he shouted, the great swordsman is here with a famous sword and wine, and Bao Zun wakes up immediately. Thanks. Zoro quickly thanked Lucas, but when he saw Mihawk the Hawkeye not far from Lucas, his eyes rounded. Isn't he going to see to challenge Hawkeye? Practicing kendo hard, why did he work so hard to come to Grand Line? Fight Hawkeye and steal the title of the world's #1 swordsman. With Kuina's share become stronger. Hawkeye also noticed Zoro's burning gaze, not surprising. After all, as the world's #1 swordsman, has he encountered few opponents over the years? Advertisement. Frequently encountered challenges from strong men on the sea, or many stunned youths from all over the world, want to defeat him and become the world's #1 swordsman. It just so happened that his eagle-eyed boring life can also be added a little bit of fun by these people. In his opinion, Zoro is also in this category. But nobody refuses to come. Hawkeye has his confidence. Hey, who is he? Luffy clasped his nose and asked Sanji curiously. Sanji shook his head, he is not a living encyclopedia. Roronoa Zoro, 3 swordsmen, East Blue. Baby 5 thought about it for a while, and then told the news about Zoro. She had followed some East Blue news before, and happened to see Zoro's news. When Luffy heard this, his eyes were full of curiosity when he looked at Zoro. Lucas's use of 9 knives was actually just an excitement. The eldest brother mainly uses a knife. And this Zoro is a genuine 3-sword style. If Lucas can return his life to the opponent, wouldn't the opponent be able to use the 9-sword style, or even more knives? Hey, join Marine as my companion. Luffy hurriedly waved to Zoro and shouted. Zoro was about to challenge Hawkeye when he heard some silly squeaking words to pull him into the Marine team. I don't even bother to think about the reason, so I have to recruit him, is it really okay? Zoro didn't respond to these words very much, just glanced at Luffy curiously, and then challenged Hawkeye. Hawkeye glanced at Zoro in surprise, he was really busy today. Destroyed a ship of pirates, proposed to Marine Admiral the idea of a competition, and then was challenged by a young swordsman from East Blue. Lucas gave Zoro a chance to compete, walked away and sat next to Sanji, ready to watch Hawkeye's solo show. He rubbed Luffy's head, it was really his sweet cotton pants. Everyone knows to help him abduct talents. However, he would not interfere with Suoda's road. One is because the other party is getting older, and his thoughts have basically taken shape after he grows up. It is impossible to try to educate the other party with his own words and deeds. Another, there is no other reason. Zoro challenged Hawkeye, and Hawkeye spoke a lot of words, and then took off the cross hanging from his neck. The sheath of the cross was pulled down, revealing the smallest knife. Advertisement. Zoro had the words Hidao on his mouth, and his left and right hands were third-generation Ghost Toru and Yukizo. He carefully observed the eagle eye, his muscles were tense, the blades of the two blades were pointed at the eagle eye in front of him, and he rushed up with a roar. Hawkeye didn't have any expressions, but just dodged slightly and escaped Zoro's slash. The knife in his hand didn't hit Zoro's back, just teasing him. Hey, the first great swordsman of the century, do I still need to use my full strength to fight a Xiaomengxin? Unnecessary. Just play. Giving your back to the enemy will kill you. Lucas's voice came over. Zoro quickly turned around, and pointed at the eagle eye behind him. Kang. The knife in Hawkeye's hand easily blocked Zoro's knife. He looked at Zoro playfully, thinking about what he should say to make it more fun. Is your knife a toy? It's limp. Quote exclamation mark quote. Zoro roared, and slashed with both knives in his hands, cutting away at Hawkeye continuously, and the word Kazuo on his mouth kept blocking Hawkeye's playful attacks. He became more and more vigorous and excited, watching Hawkeye keep retreating under his offensive. It's just that Hawkeye is just playing, Zoro doesn't have any advantage. The harder he fights now, the worse he will lose. The two of them hit the ship from the bow to the stern, the whole process is eagle eye release, step by step like a rhythmic advance and retreat, sometimes retreat, let Zoro's fierce offensive hit without any chaos. Sometimes with a little bit of strength, Zoro backed away in a panic. Three Swords tried his best to block Hawkeye's swing, just a small knife, so embarrassed. Zoro recognized the huge gap between himself and Hawkeye. Keep calm, concentrate, and perceive every movement of your opponent wholeheartedly, don't be affected by a little thing, and treat every attack of the enemy calmly. A reminder came. Zoro nodded slightly, and calmed down before long, focusing on the opponent, Hawkeye, with all his heart and soul. The swing of each knife was sharper than before, and the timing and method of the knife were more accurate. Hawkeye had a little more interest in his heart, and a little more patience, letting Zoro continue to play like this with him. He wanted to see how much this young man could improve in a short time under Lucas's guidance. In the past, most of the losers who challenged him were nothing more than two kinds. The bigger and the more angry, the heart is full of jealousy and unwillingness. The other type was finished, the knife was broken, the person was still there, and the courage to be a swordsman was gone, so he knelt down and begged for mercy and cried out to his mother. And this young man, just after hearing a reminder, adjusted his state, his mentality became stable and calmer, and his kendo had improved a little bit. Hawkeye smiled, and the knife in his hand directly opened the two knives in Zoro's left and right hands, and stabbed Zoro in the heart. Zoro does not retreat but advances, facing the knife. Chapter 281. The Long War on Broccoli Island. Advertisement. The Kazuichi word dangling from Zoro's mouth quickly blocked Hawkeye's knife. Although the knife in Hawkeye's hand is small, his strength is much higher than that of Zoro, and he is not a level opponent at all. With a loud sound, the sound of metal switching rang in my ears, and Zoro flew backwards with a knife. He fell onto the deck with a bang, and Hidao made a few twists in the air. The tip of the knife pierced into the deck, and most of the blade fell into the deck. Zoro looked at the words of Hidao inserted into the deck beside him, and didn't feel any loss in his heart. He stood up and looked at the man in front of him. Then he glanced at Lucas, who was happily watching the battle in the distance. These people were not opponents he could challenge now. He will continue to work hard until the moment he can beat the opponent. Ah, that's it, Lucas thought in his heart, where's the famous scene? What about, I won't lose anymore. Hawkeye expressed his appreciation for Zoro, and by the way, he looked forward to the opponent Barabara, and only then walked in front of Lucas and challenged him. Well, Lucas can't help it. After all, it is the plot he destroyed, and it is normal not to see so many famous scenes. Boy, be optimistic, there is still a lot you can improve. Lucas and Hawkeye stood opposite each other and each drew their knives. Black knife. Knight. Zoro looked straight at the black knife that Hawkeye pulled out and sat beside him. Luffy and Sanji didn't hear what they said. Famous swords are the favorite of swordsmen. As soon as they finished speaking, Lucas and Hawkeye quickly rushed towards each other, shaking their hands while moving their bodies. The movements of the two were very fast, and the fog along the way surging with the naked eye, the knife and the knife collided with each other, sparks shot in all directions, and the crisp metal collision sound passed into Zoro's ears. At this time, Lucas has not used the fruit ability. He and Hawkeye hit you and me, and the figure flashed quickly on the boat, reacting quickly to wave a knife and block. Zoro watched the match between the two excitedly, his eyes constantly moving with the movement of the two, and the shadows of the two quickly slashing were reflected on the eyeballs, and every move was very dangerous. Lucas quickly retreated backwards, and Hawkeye slashed a wave of chopping at him. With a long knife in his hand, he attacked from the bottom up, directly hitting the chopping wave high in the air. The chopping wave quickly flew towards the sky, and the clouds surged. Lucas rushed to Hawkeye and forced it back with a single knife. Then he raised his hand to cut out a chopping wave. Hawkeye reacted quickly. The black knife Yoruichi in his hand swung and flew the chopping wave. In the next instant, Lucas raised his leg and directly kicked a slash formed by Tempest Kick to Hawkeye. Hawkeye hit the chopping wave again and sent it to the sky. Advertisement. Zoro watched the battle between the two become more and more intense, clasping his fists excitedly and watching the match between the strong, which was also a good opportunity for him to learn. It's called Tempest Kick, it's one of the 6 styles. Sanji said. Zoro nodded and continued to listen to Sanji's introduction, while staring at Lucas and Hawkeye's knife. It's like watching an NBA game. I can't bear to look away, but I have to listen to the rational analysis next to me. Hockey. It's a kind of. Sanji introduced the concept of hockey to Zoro. What is observation hockey? What is armament hockey? And how to train? Zoro wrote these down. Not to mention, Lu can't remember clearly, but as long as it is related to kendo and hockey, you can remember it when you hear it. It's worthy of my claim. In fact, Brother Lucas has a cool trick. Do you want to learn it? Sugar patted Zoro bewildered. What? Zoro listened attentively, his eyes just keeping Lucas and Hawkeye. Quote. Sugar looked at Zoro in surprise. This man is too obsessed with kendo. Return your life. After you learn it, you can control any part of your body. Sugar introduced the concept of return of life to Zoro, and explained Lucas's tricks of controlling hair with multiple knives. However, she couldn't say how to practice the return of life. Unless this person joins Marine. How to practice? Zoro asked. Join Marine. Zoro didn't reply. He didn't want to join Marine because he spent most of his time in kendo. He just wanted to devote himself to kendo, and didn't want to be wasted by too many chores. So he didn't want to join a certain force in his heart. The battle between Lucas and Hawkeye continued. The two of them had stronger and stronger chopping waves, and the speed of their swords was getting faster and faster. Every move was extremely dangerous. The slashing waves were either blocked, thrown high in the sky, or flew quickly over the sea, submerged in the mist. The swordsmanship of both of them was very strong, and they controlled well, and none of the chopping waves accidentally wounded or damaged the hull. The fog gradually dissipated, and the warship and the two small boats tied to the warship sailed away from the fog. Not far from them, there was an island. If they got closer, they would hear the sound of shouting to the sky. Advertisement. As the hull continued to approach the island, the sound of killing and the sound of guns spread to everyone's ears, and the sound of a cannon was deafening. Soldiers from two forces on the island rushed to kill a group, the artillery stopped, and then the sound of screams came into the ears. The outcome of Lucas and Hawkeye was far from being separated. They separated, standing in the bow of the ship watching the situation on the shore. This island is called Broccoli Island, and it is going through a war. Continue next time, Lucas said to Hawkeye beside him. Good, Hawkeye agreed. As a capable person, Lucas didn't even use his ability to compete with him, which made Hawkeye's impression of him a lot better. If the opponent uses the ability, although he will lose, it is not a pure swordsman competition. He looked at the huge trees on the island in front of him like broccoli, stepped off the boat, and listened to the sound of killing in his ear. The two armies fighting together completely ignored the Marine who landed on the island. This is a war on their island and is not under the control of Marine. Generally, no Marine will take the initiative to manage wars in any country. The island where the Eagle Eye lived, the country was defeated in the end. Lucas looked at the island in front of him. The war on this island was also terrible, except that the war on the island where there was no Eagle Eye was fierce. Relatively speaking, the length of the war on this island is equally desperate. If no one is in charge, this war can be fought until the plot of Germa 66 comes on the scene. Should we do it? Sugar asked hesitantly. It's not easy to manage. Lucas shook his head. After all, it is a problem with other countries, and they are not easy to intervene. But it was very simple for him to end this small-scale war. Someone blocked the way and threatened their safety. It's normal to send a biao. Get out of here. Lucas deliberately slowed down, the knife plunged into the ground, and a huge chopping wave was cut out from the knife. The slashing wave tore the earth and came fiercely. It scared the fierce soldiers and ran away, using the strength of suckling to retreat. One by one, they were fighting fiercely before. Facing such a powerful chopping wave, they were all scared. Lucas glanced, and all these soldiers had withdrawn. The escape is first rate, the weapons are lagging behind, no wonder the fight for so long has not distinguished the winners or losers. Chapter 280-2280. Idiots and road idiots look for Mahawk. Advertisement. The chopping wave continued to tear the ground, and hit the big tree in the distance. The bark was torn apart, and the huge broccoli-like tree was divided into two in the next instant. The two halves of the tree squeaked and fell to the sides, rumbling, and smoke was everywhere. The soldiers in two regiments looked at the long and deep gully and the tree that fell in half on the ground in shock. What a powerful slash. The sea breeze blows along the coast, taking away the billowing smoke and dust. What followed was that the soldiers of the two forces turned around and fled, without staying at all. After a while, the ground was full of cold weapons such as swords and flintlocks. I'm even more timid than those pirates. A Marine captain looked at the lost weapons all over the ground, and the dust that a large number of soldiers ran away again. The people who want to fight are actually only the top group. They also want to end the war soon. Sanji sighed and walked forward with a cigarette in his mouth, squatting down and closing his eyes for a dead soldier. Can we stop them? Luffy glanced at Lucas at this time. This is not something we can manage. Lucas shook his head. Although when joining the army, the seniors always said to the newcomers, Marine is an army that carries out security work for the oceans of the world with absolute justice. But over time, many people will find that their justice cannot be brought to all places. Marine will not manage the affairs of the country. This is not in the rules and cannot be managed. If there are pirates to deal with a member of the world government, they will dispatch Marine. Marine Admiral is just the top hitter of the world government, and they are not the ones who make the rules. There will be a long war on Broccoli Island. At least for now, the situation brought about by the war is not as bad as it will be in a few years. The scale of the war here is still small, just a small-scale conflict, and the battlefield is only in the wild. Lucas took people all the way to a city, watched the people coming and going on the street, bought some food from the vendors, and found a hotel. He stayed with Sanji and others. The other Marines guarded the ship at his request. I'm going out. Lucas looked at Luffy as he walked out of the room, and ignored him. Do we really care about it? Granulated sugar sat beside Lucas, sending a grape to his mouth. No matter. Lucas shook his head, holding cards in his hand, and sitting opposite Sanji and Baby -5. Advertisement. The four of them played fighting landlords, wouldn't they? I teach you. Don't you follow us, I can teach you a lot. Lucas said to the green algae head at the door. No. Zoro shook his head, glanced at the leaving Hawkeye, and followed. Lucas glanced at Zoro who had left, then lowered his head to continue playing cards. Luffy changed into casual clothes and walked down the street wearing a pair of slippers. Brother Lucas said he wouldn't let it go, and he couldn't help it. After all, national wars cannot be managed by himself alone. It is estimated that his idiot brother has no ability to manage. After leaving for a while, Luffy had 2 large barbecue legs in his hands. He took a bite from the left and another bite. It was so refreshing. The scale of the war on the island was small, and people continued to live as usual, but there were quite a few people on the streets. Luffy walked along and suddenly found a familiar green in the crowd. He thought of the swordsman with 3 swords and quickly waved his hand and shouted, "Hey, Zoro, wait for me." 3 swords swordsman, it's fun to think about it. The crowd was surging. Zoro looked in front of him puzzledly, he remembered that man was walking here. But what happened to me? Got lost again. The sound around him is noisy, shouting, talking, drunk and swearing constantly in his ears. Zoro buttoned his ears and turned to look behind him. I didn't hear it clearly, as if someone called him. It also seems to be an illusion. In the crowd behind, he only saw a big fleshy leg shaking constantly, which aroused his appetite. Find a tavern to eat some meat and some wine. Zoro turned back and walked forward quickly, looking for the tavern. Luffy looked at the disappearing green fur, and hurriedly chased him up. As a result, he ran to the end of the street and couldn't find him. It's weird. Luffy looked around, scanning the surrounding buildings. A tavern window, a touch of green is extremely bright. Luffy's eyes lit up. The whole tavern has that green hair. This must be the 3-sword swordsman, can't be wrong. He hurriedly passed through the crowd, stepped into the tavern, walked to the head of the green algae, and sat down. Luffy. Zoro looked at the person who appeared in front of him. Zoro ordered some more food, and he and Luffy ate together. Advertisement. Are you looking for that eagle eye? Zoro nodded. He is still alone now. Besides kendo, he will also develop hockey in the future. He doesn't know where to go. I'll help you find it together, he. Luffy smiled. This guy is still a lunatic, so interesting. Good. Thanks. After eating and drinking, Zoro and his new friend Luffy walked out of the tavern, discussing and looking for the man named Mihawk. Luffy will buy a piece of barbecue along the way, and Zoro will have a sip of wine later, and ask passers-by how to get there. Through the crowd, walked one street after another. Lucas and the others were still resting in the hotel, playing cards. Luffy and Zoro are in this city, wandering from south to north, from north to west, and then to the east again. The sun went down, the night fell, the dim moonlight cast on the street, the cold wind blew, and the leaves rolled up and circled a few times. Luffy and Zoro looked at each other suspiciously. With the addition of Luffy, they wouldn't have to go to the same area a few more times, but it was unavoidable to get lost again and again. The corners and alleys became the sad place for the two of them, and the city walls let them know that they had gone too far. In desperation, they had to walk into a tavern, order food, and order a few bottles of wine. Only this dinner can alleviate the bad mood of being lost for a day. Do you remember the original road? Zoro suddenly broke the silence of the two and looked at Luffy, who was gobbled up. Luffy's cheeks were bulging and his mouth was full of meat. He took a sip of wine quickly before swallowing it. I think about it. Luffy looked towards the street, looked at the strange building, suddenly found the point, and slapped the table. Remembered. Zoro looked at each other in surprise. He and Lucas had booked a hotel. Oops, I forgot the way back. Luffy grabbed his hair and looked at Zoro bitterly. Don't you see S***X? Zoro quickly reminded the idiot. Yeah, Luffy slapped his hands. Worthy of being a lost duo. Chapter 283,281. Hawkeye. What's so good about it? Advertisement. In the hotel, there were 5 people around a table, 4 of them playing cards, and sugar onlookers. Dracula Mihawk didn't know how to fight against landlords, but Lucas explained that the competition will continue tomorrow. He thought about it, and it took him a while to learn how to play cards with Lucas. Holding cards in his hand, he looked at Lucas's empty hand, and looked at his own hand. Well, he lost. Pick up a glass of wine, drink it directly, shuffle the cards, and continue. Doodiju, isn't this more fun than the size of DeSolo's Naruachi? And those who lose just drink, which saves money. Squeak. The door was opened, and Luffy and Zoro walked in. They looked at the 4 playing cards curiously. Why did you come back so late and ran into a beautiful woman? Sanji smiled at the two and joked. Quote. Zoro hadn't spoken yet. Luffy said directly, I'm lost. You're an idiot, that also means. Zoro looked at Luffy. Puff. Ha ha ha. Except for Gao Lengfan's eagle eyes, everyone laughed, and the room was full of joy. It turned out to be a road idiot. Zoro looked at the eagle eye playing cards, lost in thought. When did he return to the hotel? Zoro and Luffy searched for a day, traveled around the city, but did not meet Hawkeye. Tomorrow we will continue to compete. Mihawk will not go. You can ask him for advice if you have time. Of course you can also ask me. Lucas said to Zoro, who was drinking while holding a card in his hand. Yeah, Zoro nodded, then glanced at the cold eagle eye. He reached out for a few cards, thought for a while, and played the cards blankly. Just glanced at Zoro and said nothing. I don't know if it is willing or unwilling. Zoro didn't think much about it. He already knew the concept of hockey and how to develop it. In fact, it doesn't matter whether it is taught or not. He is confident, relying on his own efforts. One day he can surpass the man in front of him, and then become the world's #1 swordsman. After playing the cards, Hawkeye filled his stomach with drinks, looked at Lucas skeptically, got up and walked back to his room and began to rest. Go back to each house and sleep. Lucas stood up and drank the drink in the glass. I only lost 2 or 3 times, which is really embarrassing. Drink a glass of wine at a time, and there are several empty wine bottles under Hawkeye's feet. Hawkeye must have been sleeping soundly tonight. Happiness. The doors of each room were closed, leaving only Zoro and Sanji. Hey, little Prince Lucci with a green algae head, do you want to sleep with me? Advertisement. Zoro looked at the eagle-eyed room on the opposite side, then glared at Sanji again, stood up, and walked out of Sanji's room. Don't be angry, don't be angry. The other party also told him about hockey's development method, not angry. Sanji looked at the back of Zoro walking out of the house, a little puzzled. I don't know what's going on. When he meets this guy, it's as if he is born with the other person. He always wants to fight each other, laugh and scold each other. Sanji glanced at the ground, the empty wine bottles placed in a mess, some snack crumbs on the table. These guys. Others have fallen asleep, and he is still cleaning the house. Daching jujube. Lucas got up early, got dressed and walked out of the hotel, and saw Zoro wielding a knife constantly with sweat. It's early. Zoro nodded and continued to stand on the side of the street, doing morning exercises. His Zoro, besides good talent, strong body, hardworking training, and handsome, his advantages are really not that many. Therefore, in order to become the world's strongest swordsman, he has to redouble his efforts to achieve his goal. You're pretty early too. Zoro glanced at Lucas, and now it's still dark. He just came out for morning exercises, the other side came out. Get used to it. Lucas stretched, sitting in the doorway blowing a small breeze, very comfortable. I used to get up every day before dawn and hurry up for training. In the past few years, his own strength and fruiting ability have been greatly improved. Until now, it is no longer a short time to think about improving. He just looked away, relax when you need to relax, and train when you need to train. Zoro put away the knife and glanced at Lucas. Run. Good. Lucas agreed. The two ran on the street together, Lucas blowing a small breeze. Zoro ran to the side, ran around, turned a corner, and ran into the alley. Hey, where are you going? Lucas yelled quickly, and Zoro turned his head to look at him in surprise. Why did this guy run behind him? Lucas almost couldn't hold back a laugh, and had a preliminary insight into the attributes of Zoro's lost. Zoro turned around and continued to follow him. Just in case, Lucas let the opponent run ahead of him. Then, Lucas understood what the real little prince is. Zoro often didn't realize the problem by himself, making magical turns when he ran, and was called back by Lucas again and again. Advertisement. Lucas stood there, looking at Zoro, who plunged into the alley once again, lost in thought. Forget it, let him go. He was afraid of bringing Zoro into the Marine team, and then the opponent took the lead in taking the small group of Marine away. Regardless of Zoro, Lucas just took a step to continue running, only to find Zoro running out of a small alley in front of him. You deserve it. Zoro is running and feels something wrong. Why is there no sound behind him? Running out of a small alley again, he glanced at the city wall that appeared in front of him and realized the seriousness of the problem. Whoosh. There was a voice. Zoro turned to look. Lucas just stepped on the moonwalk and landed on the roof, waving at him. I thought you lost it. Ha ha. Linton laughed strangely, hiding his face and walking away. God, I ran and lost it, don't bring such a dumpling. The two ended their sad morning exercises and walked back to the hotel together. At this time, the sky was bright, the sun shone through the fog and shone on the street, and the fog quickly dissipated. Sanji stood at the door and saw the two who came back. It's been a long time. He is lost. Where am I lost? Zoro is a little bit unwilling. No, don't talk nonsense, it's too foggy. If there is no fog, you will get lost. Sanji remembered the thing that Zoro and Luffy got lost yesterday, and couldn't help but laugh, and Lucas also burst into laughter. Curl your eyebrows, don't talk nonsense. What do you say about me? Curl your eyebrows. Road crazy. Curl your eyebrows. The little prince with a green algae head. Quote. Lucas sat at the door, took the grapes handed by the sugar and put it in his mouth, smiling as the two quarreled. It smells like that, this young couple smells like it. In a short while, the two of them upgraded from a simple quarrel to hands-on action. In fact, it was just the little things like pinching the skin, kicking the face, kicking the crotch, and punching the mouth. Lucas, Luffy, Sugar, and Baby 5 squatted at the door, watching the thief happily. Chapter 284,282. Fighting Eagle Eyes again. Advertisement. The two armies confronted each other early in the morning, and the soldiers clung to their guns one by one, and the sabers hanging on their waists swung. The soldier standing at the forefront of the army held the weapon in his hand tightly and stared nervously at the enemy on the opposite side. That is. A soldier pointed at a person walking in the distance, and saw his face clearly. His fingers trembled a little. A pair of eagle-like sharp yellow eyes shot cold gazes from under the hat, and the yelling soldier was a little frightened. Mihawk stood there with his broad knife on his back, watching the man across from him. The soldiers on both sides quickly turned their heads and looked to the other side. A tall man wearing a white cloak, with a long knife glowing with cold light hanging from his waist, stood there, watching his opponent. The soldiers recognized these two men. One of them was the strongest swordsman in the world. He was called the Dracula Mihawk because of his eagle-like eyes. The other person is Admiral, Marine's current admiral. Neither of them can be dealt with. Regardless of their large number of people, but they have a bottom in their hearts, knowing that no matter how weak chickens are, they will be killed by Wushwang in front of the big guys. Each one stepped back slowly in fear, not daring to disturb the big man's pretend. Compare. Hawkeye's sharp eyes crossed the crowd, pointed directly at the opposite side, and reached out to pull out the big knife on his back. He raised the black sword knight, and then slashed violently. A cyan chopping wave flew out, tearing the ground, leaving a long gully, violently passing through the field between the two armies, and slashing towards Lucas. On the other side, the same terrifying chopping wave tore the ground and quickly chopped towards Hawkeye. One by one, the soldiers of the two armies were so scared that they dropped their weapons and turned and fled. They have seen this level of chopping wave once, and no one wants to stay here. After all, if they were affected by the chopping, they would die too miserably. The two slashes bombarded together, producing a strong shock wave, and smoke and dust everywhere. Lucas and Mihawk rushed towards each other at the same time, their pace kept accelerating, and both hands gripped the handle of the knife. The two knives slammed together, and the blades made a sharp metal sound. How do I feel that the two of them deliberately chose to compete here? Sanji looked at the soldiers who fled and dropped their weapons to fight unintentionally. And beside him, there are several people from Luffy. They sat in the distance, watching the wonderful duel. Don't talk nonsense, be careful of being beaten. Baby 5 covered her mouth and smiled. Tisk tusk. Zoro held a toothpick in his mouth and watched the two with relish, without hearing any discussion from others. Hey, Zoro, would you like to learn to develop haki now? Sanji looked at Zoro unkindly and smirked twice. Okay. Zoro nodded. Wait for me to finish reading. The battle between Lucas and Mihawk continued to escalate, and one wave of chopping waves quickly flew to both sides, cutting off the big trees along the road, and smashing the boulders. Advertisement. There were more and more chopping waves, and their power became stronger and stronger, although both of them escaped the opponent's chopping waves. But a few people who watched the battle were suffering. Whoosh! A chopping wave flew through the air and galloped past Zoro not far away, splitting a boulder in two with one blow. Sanji and Baby 5 stay away from Zoro, there is no need to avoid them. Luffy and Sugar were the closest to Zoro. Luffy hugged Sugar and jumped aside. The four of them looked at Zoro in shock and continued to watch the competition. This guy is too fascinated by kendo. In the tone of Brother Lucas, Zoro is a sword idiot. Sanji sighed. Zoro glanced at Sanji and continued to watch the battle. I've heard of Lu Chi, Chi-Han, idiot, nympho. Sugar put the grape into her mouth, but what is Jian Kai? Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Sanji and others looked at the Sugar and felt that this was a big problem. I always feel that Sugar is mirroring them. Whoosh. A chopping wave flew quickly. Zoro got up and flew directly, hiding behind him. The momentum of the chopping wave was unabated, and it pierced a huge broccoli-like tree with a bang, and the tree fell to the ground with a loud bang. Let's retreat back. Sanji greeted several people quickly. Zoro was at the back, slowly backing away while watching. On the boat, Lucas and Hawkeye still had scruples in the competition, and he would pay attention to the boat. Now I came to the larger island in the field and let go. Zoro watched the match between the two with relish, and Luffy cheered as he watched the big scene brought about by the two huge slashing waves. And Sanji breathed out, and missed those beautiful little sisters in the city streets, the fascinating curves. What are you going for? Sugar raised her head, looking at Sanji who was about to slip away and asked loudly. I'm going to smoke a cigarette. It's fine here. Quote. Sanji sighed, and could only give up the pretty lady, standing aside smoking a cigarette, and closed her eyes and fantasizing about the perfume smell on her. As a result, the body approached Baby 5 a little bit without knowing it. Advertisement. Snapped. Baby 5's hand gently placed Sanji's face, pushing him away. Hey, sad. Redundant words, disgusting. Sugar glared at Sanji. Hey, it was all taught by Big Brother Lucas, who wouldn't know how to use such a tone. Sanji sighed, and stood aside, holding a cigarette in his hand, and poking sadly. The two women clenched their fists and stomped their feet to cheer on Brother Lucas. Lucas doesn't use the fruit ability, and when he fights with Hawkeye, he opens up a 5-to-5 mode. You can't help me, and I can't help you. He and Hawkeye had been fighting from morning until noon. Luffy was tired of seeing it, and soon cut down a huge tree, and then cut through a small mountain. I've seen too many big scenes, and I'm all visually tired. With his hand supporting his chin, he thought of all kinds of meat delicacies. Huh, Sanji took a cigarette. They are too good at fighting. Luffy, do you want to eat? Yes, Luffy quickly replied excitedly. No, you don't want to. Sugar grabbed Luffy's hand, then glared at Sanji. Delicacy. Mistaken. The only thing Sanji missed was the beauty in a bikini. Sugar looked at Zoro sitting in the front with admiration, and saw what it means to be very energetic. Zoro saw noon in the morning. Not only was he not sleepy, but he also got more energetic as he watched. What happened to the May 5 match? In Zoro's eyes, the two strong men are fighting each other in 5-5. It is that the two powerful men are doing their best to swing their swords. This is a very exciting match. Whoosh. Lucas hit a slash and flew back quickly. Sanji looked at the cut cigarette in his hand and swallowed. I think it's still a bit close here. Agree. X3. Zoro continued to watch the duel, listened to the cry of more than 10 meters later, and turned to look at the few people. Chapter 285,283. Development is not easy. Zoro sighs. Advertisement. Boom. The cork was pulled off, and the wine from the bottle was poured into the glass. Zoro poured the drink, raised his head and started drinking. Hey, do you think Big Brother Lucas is considered the world's strongest swordsman? Sanji joked, tapping Zoro on the shoulder. Don't talk nonsense, I'm not the strongest swordsman at all. Lucas glared at Sanji. His true strength is stronger than Hawkeye's unremarkable loss when he doesn't use abilities. This can only give him some advantages in the fight with Hawkeye. If he really wants to win, he will have to come for a few days and nights at least. Now he and Hawkeye have no winners or losers. But, the eldest brother doesn't even use his ability, so he can already. Happiness. Lucas patted the table several times and glared at BABY5 who said this. Don't look at your beautiful and sexy body, good at dressing up, and cute but cute. Big brother will still beat you when he is angry. Zoro glanced at Lucas unexpectedly, then continued drinking. I am not a pure swordsman, I am not the strongest swordsman in the world, and I am not worthy. Lucas shook his head, and Hawkeye looked at him in surprise. Maybe one day in the future, I can fight for the title of the world's strongest person. Lucas said with a sip of wine. Zoro originally admired Lucas who had said the previous sentence, but the latter sentence would not be passed on to him. So narcissistic, this guy. Fortunately, he is not Marine, so I will ask the two seniors here. He will leave after a while, and the province will be infected. Ahem. Hawkeye coughed slightly, and looked at Lucas in surprise with his mouth. Even Hawkeye, who has always been well-trained and can't laugh out loud, almost couldn't help laughing. That's it. Sanji squeezed his chin and looked at brother Lucas thinking deeply. That year, he cried and left the cold home without warmth. Then I saw that big brother Lucas, who rushed across the sea on moonwalk, gave him a warm smile and adopted him. Whenever someone laughed at him for ALLBLUE, brother Lucas would stare at those bastards and run away. Brother Lucas has always believed that his dream will come true. Sanji smiled and slapped the table. Then I will continue to stay with brother Lucas cooking. When brother Lucas became the strongest person in the world, it stands to reason that I am the best chef in the world. Got it. That's right. Ha ha ha. Lucas took Sanji's shoulders, holding up the drink and pouring it. Quote. Luffy looked at Sanji, looked at Lucas, then looked at Zoro, suddenly feeling very aggrieved. Advertisement. At once. Excessive. Your own dream will finally come true, but my One Piece is gone. Wrong Baba bite your hand. JPG. Close black lens bracket. In the afternoon, in the open space outside the city. A grass from within. A man with a hat on his head squatted here, lying on the ground, peeping at people in the distance with blades of grass. He was a member of one of the troops in the war in the morning, and there was a word from above. When did these people leave the island, and when did they go to war? Because some people in this group are really scary and don't really be human. Lucas and Hawkeye's slashing waves were so powerful that they didn't dare to fight anymore. The island is not big, but the place that is suitable for war is occupied by Marine. It's too much. Lucas coached the two girls with Sugar and BABY5, and Sanji taught Zoro to develop hockey. Hawkeye sat under a tree and began to maintain health. In the past, he often went to the red-haired Shanks to compete, but recently he found a good quality tool. During this time he intends to compete with Lucas. Shanks. So, love will become right. Where's that guy Luffy? Zoro looked around in puzzlement. He just saw him. Who knows where that idiot has gone? You probably got lost because of your infection. Sanji shook the stick in his hand and smiled. Don't spit people, okay. Nosebleed chef. Zoro glared at Sanji. Huh. Sanji clenched the cigarette with his teeth tightly, and curled his eyebrows even more. You, the little Prince Lucci, are justified. The cook who sees beautiful women while eating is bleeding knows. Zoro has been in contact with this group of talents for a few days, and has also learned the yin and yang weirdness from Lu. Chlorophyta, can you find the difference? How much is a pound of your melon? Quote. Quote. Zoro and Sanji looked at Lucas in surprise. You are not right. At first, the two of them were about to fight, but they were completely confused by a sentence. Humph. Whispering sound. Zoro Sanji both looked at each other and turned their heads together. Advertisement. Lucas, Sugar, and Baby 5 had big watery Kazilan eyes, sitting on the side with snacks, obediently watching the show. Quote. A line of crows flew past Zoro and Sanji's foreheads, lining up to scold idiots. After a short while, the two of them again, like the okay person, seriously, talked about the development of knowledge. Do you really want to do this? It's the fastest, really, you're right to hear me. Well, as long as I can develop the sights and smells as quickly as possible, I can do it, thank you, lucky chef. It's okay, we are friends, Prince Lucci. Zoro held the blindfolded black cloth in his hand, and Sanji held a long and thick wooden stick in his hand. In the perspective of Lucas and others, these two people interpret what is called real man's friendship, nuclear goodness, my best friend beat me in tears, and the reason is touching. Zoro was blindfolded, standing on the spot, carefully feeling everything, listening quietly, and eagerly letting himself feel the breath of Sanji. Sanji tried to wave the wooden stick in his hand. The stick was big and hurt, but it was very suitable for training. It's all to help you develop your sense of experience, so bear with it. Bring it on. Zoro didn't frown, and waited quietly. Sanji swung the stick down and slapped it on Zoro's forehead. Zoro gritted his teeth. Go on. Granulated sugar paused with Grape's hand and swallowed, it looks so painful. Sanji's strength seems to be a little bit stronger than usual. Baby 5 tut. Public revenge. Lucas took a bite of senbei and drank a drink. And the soldier hiding in the grass took a breath, behaved, this man is too cruel. Visible to the naked eye, a big bag appeared on Zoro's forehead. Happiness. Zoro frowned slightly invisible, and avoided Sanji's stick a few times, but he didn't hide most of the sticks. But the other party is Marine, or a new friend he has met, you wouldn't lie to him, right? Quote. Hawkeye sat aside, watching the show with a masterful demeanor. At the same time, inside the city, Luffy walked out of the restaurant and looked at the street suspiciously. Where is this? He was very helpless when he was dragged into a restaurant by the smell of meat just now. Chapter 286,284. The mudslide in the funny world, the captain is really a personal monster. Advertisement. When the sun went down, Luffy found Lucas and others. Oh, we are all going to go back, are you full? Lucas said with a smile. Quote. Luffy looked at his elder brother angrily, his yin and yang strangeness was getting worse and worse. I'm teasing you, let's go. Zoro patted Luffy on the shoulder and laughed. Hey, I haven't seen you at this time. How did you become a monk? Luffy looked at Zoro's head curiously. Quote. Zoro stared at Luffy with a big bag, holding back for a long time. Go away. Puff ha ha ha. Sanji clutched his stomach and couldn't stop laughing. A few days later, after Luffy finished eating early in the morning, he received a big task from brother Lucas. Is it really good to recruit naval soldiers on this island? Anyway, elder brother said that he had discussed with the upper management and approved it, he. Luffy smiled heartlessly, and everyone around looked at him in surprise. So far, he has not discovered the problem. Big brother, this is trusting you. Sanji said with a smile, but thought in his heart, big brother, this is using your idiot stunned nature to do things. Why are you laughing weirdly? No, you read it wrong. Luffy also wanted to ask, but was kicked out by Sanji, come on. Standing at the door of the hotel, Luffy looked at Lucas and the others packing, lost in thought. Hawkeye walked out of the hotel, and he hurriedly walked over. Aren't you talking with my eldest brother? There is always a chance to compare, why care about it for a while? Hawkeye said, and walked away with a black knife on his back. Lucas and others packed their things and left. Only one Luffy who took the task was left standing in a daze. Hey, I'm the only one. Luffy looked around, suddenly found something was wrong, and ran up to catch up. After half an hour, Lucas and others left the island and heard that Zoro had also left. Luffy led the 6 seamen he was about to arrive and scratched his hair. By the way, how do you recruit soldiers? Standing in front of the hotel, after thinking for a long time, Luffy clapped his hands suddenly. 6 seamen looked at him one after another. She, eat first. Quote. The 6 people looked at the sky with suspicion, is this so? Didn't you just have breakfast? What an unreliable boss. Advertisement. That, please tell me how to get out of the city. At this time, a pretty boy with green hair asked the passersby for directions. My house. The woman stared at this very manly man. I'm talking about going out of town. Luffy reiterated again that he is not **X cook. My home is not far from here. Quote. The green hair walked away tired, there was no way to talk about it, okay. Zoro. Luffy. You didn't go. Ahem. Zoro looked at the sky embarrassedly, he didn't get lost. I remembered Lucas's tone. I just, was lost at the crossroads of life for a while. Quote. Luffy thought for a while, but didn't understand. Let's go, eat. Quote. Zoro suddenly had a bad feeling. But he thought about it seriously, Lucas and the others are gone, and Hawkeye is missing. My hockey hasn't been developed yet, so continue to get along with Luffy for a few days, Luffy can also help him train. Well, Luffy shouldn't be less reliable than Sanji, right? Alabasta. A passenger ship docked on the shore, and tourists stood on the ship, curiously watching the Kung Fu manatee challenging the pirates on the shore. Captain, shall we go around? On the shore, a pirate boy looked at the captain and suggested. No, the captain wears two balls of white pom-poms on his head, a swan decoration on one of his shoulders, and a pink coat. He stood in front of all the boys, his back turned to the kung fu manatee, and paws pointed in one direction. True S asterisk 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 E, you have to go forward bravely. You can't be defeated by a little setback. What the captain said. The captain is mighty. The captain is really a personal monster. Ha ha ha. The captain smiled triumphantly after listening to the little brothers, even the female makeup on his face was distorted. He is a mudslide in the funny world Bentham. Boom. Advertisement. A kung fu manatee hit Bentham's head with a punch, and Bentham fell to the ground. The kung fu manatee was still facing its companions, showing off his small muscles, shouting, wow, to show off his record. Quote. The pirates turned their heads and covered their mouths and laughed, looking at a bag that grew out of the captain's forehead. Good fellow, there was a red ball. How can it be repaired? Bentham stood up and stared angrily at the flaunting kung fu manatee. Angrily, he walked over, and the shadow enveloped the kung fu manatee. The kung fu manatee slowly turned around and looked at Bentham, whose expression was distorted like a devil. You aroused the anger of the slave family. Boom. Bentham punched the kung fu manatee in the head and knocked the little Wong Ba with one punch. This is the S asterisk 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 E fist. Bentham yelled, and then put on a punch position. The kung fu manatees rushed up in a swarm, and Bentham rushed up with his little brother, and fought with a group of animals that people jokingly called the little bastards. This group of pirates is simply a group of idiots. On the passenger ship, a man said disdainfully. Then he moved to the side and offered a glass of wine in a courteous manner. Beauty, do we want to roll? Michelta glared at the man, who was still rubbing forward, so angry that she kicked her directly. The man held his bloody nose and stepped back in fear. She wore a small yellow dome hat, a pair of earrings on her ears swayed with the action, and she was wearing fashionable clothes, beautiful cheeks and a slender figure, her white dangling legs were retracted, and she was a moving eye-catcher on the boat. Device. Take out a paper towel and wipe the bloodline on the high heels. Michelta looked at the weird man who cleaned up the kung fu manatee and couldn't help but smile. Ha 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 ha, this smile is not reserved at all, but it is a wild laugh. But more men are attracted and fascinated by her. Beautiful women laugh wildly, they are actually pretty cute, right? It's boring, tusk. Michelta took her small umbrella, her body floated, and a group of male tourists ran over, seeing nothing, showing disappointment. A group of people around Bentham had their heads on their heads, and the kung fu manatee who had been wronged by Baba's surrender looked at him. This guy. Bentham looked into the distance, and a woman on the passenger ship flew into the sky, and then quickly disappeared into his sight. After a while, Bentham took his little brother and the group of kung fu manatees that had been beaten up to dance a ballet. If someone can understand animals, they will definitely find that these little bastards are very reluctant. Neurotic. On the passenger ship, the man holding his nosebleed looked at these guys speechlessly. The pirate didn't even rob the passenger ship just a short distance away, but instead led a group of underdogs to dance ballet, and it was the personal monster who took the lead. Chapter 287,285. Advertisement. Hey, I can't hear you. What are you talking about? The phone worm is sick today, speak up. Click. Lucas put the microphone in his hand back, and the phone bug chewed on the leaves, looking at him innocently. When did it get sick? What's wrong? Nothing. Ha ha ha. Lucas smiled and picked up the wine glass and took a sip. This is the resort. Lucas is lying on the beach, basking in the sun with sunglasses. On his side, Monet was wearing a bikini. Tisk tusk. Everyone else is men applying sunscreen to women, you are so clear. Monet patted Linton's chest and put on sunscreen. I didn't want it either. Lucas looked at her innocently, and said as much as he wanted. Quote. Sanji looked at these two people enviously, and then at the two girls, Sugar and Baby5, who isolated him. Suddenly, Sanji was attracted by a beautiful landscape. In his eyes, there was only such a beauty. On the hot day of the resort beach, the pretty girl in the purple fluffy cloak is so maverick. The red short dress with red high heels is so perfect that the slender and sensual long legs are decorated. She stepped on the sea and walked towards her face, letting Sanji see her graceful figure, the concave and convex S** X and sense. Pink hair, red eyes on a pretty white face, and lipstick on his lips. Sanji rushed out with a whistle, stood in front of the beauty, and gave the other gentleman's manners, this beautiful lady. Are you talking about me, handsome guy? A woman with her hair draped like a Saiyan, her body rounded, and her body shaped completely out of proportion to the normal person walked out from behind her sister. She stretched out her arm to reach Sanji's hand, ecstatic. It's not you. Sanji took 2 steps quickly and shook his head vigorously. Lucas kid, go away. Charlotte Garrett let out a cold voice and walked past Sanji. Man, I don't mind falling in love with Marine. Charlotte Strom winked at Sanji. Goodbye. After Sanji finished speaking, he ran away. Laughter came from behind. I think we are very destined, little Sanji. Come on, I'm dying, I'm a little dizzy, hurry up and help others. Sanji glared at the weird Sugar and Baby5, sat back on his recliner, and continued to look for the beautiful woman without changing her face. Pouch. Ha ha ha. Hey, don't laugh. Sanji looked at brother Lucas and Monet with an ugly expression. It's okay, I'll put sunscreen on her. Lucas sat up perfunctorily, putting his hands on Monet. Advertisement. Quote. Quote. Enough of you two. Luffy just came to contact. Monet looked at Lucas. Well, this kid has caused some trouble to tell me good news. It's okay, it's not a big problem, I believe him. Quote. Quote. You are not right. It is said that on that island, a country invited a person with the ability to pick booger and make bombs to join the war. As a result, Luffy had a conflict with that guy, and the recruiting booth was blown up by the opponent, and then he clashed with that capable person and beat some soldiers on the other side. Quote. Quote. Monet looked at Lucas in shock. It has only been a few days before such a catastrophe, not too big. Hurry up and help him, it was you who brought you up anyway. It's okay, the problem is not big, he has solved it. Lucas waved his hand indifferently, and he heard reports from the Marines who followed Luffy for the rest of the matter. It is indeed Luffy who has realized the essence of recklessness. Those who have the ability to pick up the nose are bruised and swollen by him. This guy has further expanded the conflict. It directly shocked the upper echelons of the two small broken countries. Luffy convinced a lot of people, and started a mouth cannon directly in front of all the soldiers, causing many soldiers to become war-weary and want to stop the war between the two countries. The upper echelons of the two countries didn't care about the life and death of the soldiers. They couldn't provoke the background Luffy, but they took the soldiers who were persuaded that day. Result: Luffy saw the soldier who was finally fooled by his mouth, and appeared in front of him with blood on his face. This guy is on top. Jingling was stunned, and Luffy even gave a beating to the ministers of the two small broken countries. No rules, one fool, one brash man. This is how Luffy did this time, but he has a background. The minister persuaded, the king looked at Tenten, who was sitting in the country to recruit the navy guy Luffy, and wanted to kill him. But now Luffy is backed by Garp, Lucas, Sakazuki, and a large number of uncles from Marine headquarters. The king almost died of anger, and there was nothing he could do about it. I will ask him to come back and close the small black house in 2 days. Lucas smiled, and Sanji sighed helplessly. Hey, Luffy has been used. Hiss. Sanji looked at the sky in the distance, his eyes straightened, in his eyes only the beauty floating down from the sky. Kawaii. Sanji stood up, completely forgetting poor Luffy. She was holding a small umbrella, floating in the air, and slowly falling towards the beach. The cute yellow hat and dress make the figure beautiful. She flew with the sun on her back, her big white legs as dazzling as the sun. Advertisement. Beauty. Ha ha ha. Quote. Quote. Michelta laughed wildly and landed on the beach, took away the wine in Sanji's hand, and smiled at him as she left. Don't look. Let's go, Lucas yelled. Nosebleeds. Ah ha ha ha. Michelta turned her head to remind Sanji, then continued to laugh and walk away. It's so beautiful, I really want to get to know it. Sanji wiped his hands full of blood, and the blood flowed from his nose. That girl is pretty, just laugh, very unique. Miss Valentine. Lucas looked at the girl, thinking for a long time before remembering who she was. But Lao Sha is finished early, and she doesn't have that code name now. Hey, where do you look? Sanji turned around, only to find that the older brother was also watching. Just watch. Monet smiled and Lucas was moved. Quote. Quote. Sanji was heartbroken, and walked to the side to continue looking for beautiful women. It's irritating to think about it. When he was young, he asked Lucas how to make a girlfriend. Lucas said some tricks, and Sanji happily ran to the next door to hook up the little girl that evening. I want to watch the morning sun with you. Snapped. There was a small red handprint on Sanji's face, and he was kicked out by the Marine Vice Admiral next door. Since then, he has understood one thing. Brother Lucas doesn't know anything about love at all. Then he knew that it was the Lucas brother Monet was chasing, and went to ask Monet. The next day he happily ran to a colonel's house next door to find the colonel's lovely daughter. Sanji followed Monet's tricks, hugged the girl and began to confess. Roll. Sanji also had a red handprint on his right cheek and was kicked out by the colonel. The autumn wind is bleak, and he is the only company with the dog on the street. Blue brew. Hey, understood, I will go back now. Lucas quickly put the microphone back in his hand, stood up and looked at Monet. Let's go, something big has happened. Sanji, don't look, follow me. Wearing boxer briefs and sunglasses, Lucas walked to the warship with a group of vacationing men. On top, it's coming. Chapter 288. Advertisement. Marine Headquarters, Marineford. Lucas returned here early. He did not go to see Sengoku the first time, but came to his home. A hospital director and Koala's mother are waiting for him here. Starting today, all doctors in the hospital will be evacuated from this island, and the orphanage will take all the children and leave Marineford. Did something big happen? Koala's mother asked. She has been helping to manage the orphanage. Well, don't ask too much, just do it. Lucas said, walking outside the door. If there is a war, we can help. The head of the hospital standing at the back quickly followed up and said. You are not Marine. If I ask you to evacuate, you will evacuate to me, where is so much nonsense? Lucas glared at him, then walked out of the yard and toward Sengoku's office. Ace has been given to Marine by Blackbeard, and Blackbeard becomes Shichibukai. Whitebeard also received the news that Ace was imprisoned by Marine. I believe it will not be long before the war on the top that Blackbeard expected will begin. What Blackbeard wants is chaos, to get a result from the chaos, so as to realize his ambition little by little. Inside the Sengoku office, Marshal Sengoku, Garp Vice Admiral, Crane Vice Admiral, Zephyr, and the three major sauces all arrived. I want to take a look at him, Garp thought while looking out the window. Ace was sent by Blackbeard, Sengoku said to everyone. The execution of Roger's son, Ace, is troublesome, but it's what Marine is looking forward to. Lucas sat next to Kuzan, watching the speeches of several big men with tea in his hand, lowering his eyebrows in thought. Blackbeard's sinister intentions, he didn't believe no one here could see it. But it is really the open match to execute Ace, which is too important for Marine as a whole. This has two advantages. First, what Roger said before his death set off an era when countless young people poured into the sea and became pirates. Although Roger is dead, the impact he has caused has continued. Roger's body is dead, and he believes that many people have inherited Roger's spirit. For example, the sick and old Whitebeard, such as the original Luffy, such as a large number of pirates who believed him. The public execution of Roger's son, cutting off Roger's blood, is obviously an excellent opportunity. This will shake the faith of the pirates who believe in One Piece. Second, to lure the Whitebeard pirates. It is said that Whitebeard played house games, but they are different from a certain ant. Whitebeard treats his son sincerely. Ace has an accident, Whitebeard will definitely come to save his son. If the Whitebeard pirate group can be eliminated, Marine's prestige will be established. At the same time, it severely cracked down on the forces of pirates. Advertisement. However, the first is always the most important, and the elimination of the Whitebeard pirates is only incidental. Where are those Shichibukai? Kuzan breathed out and asked. Lucas glanced at this guy. When they first came, Kuzan was still sleeping in the office. Already invited them. Invite. Well, in fact, I just came to see fate. Take Blackbeard, for example, this grandson went to steal the house when the fight started. Lucas suddenly thought of a good thing, wrote it down in his heart, and brought it up in a moment. He waited until the elders had finished discussing it before he said the matter. Can. Negotiations have been over for a long time at Marineford, and Sabayati Archipelago, the newcomers later known as the Evil Generation, are wandering in the street. On the distant sea, warships slowly moved towards Sabayati Archipelago. Lucas sat in a chair, flipping the reward in his hand. A reward is a supernova, but it is a pity that because of him, the Evil Generation has reduced its staff early. I don't know if the remaining 7 people can be evil. Did something big happen to Sabayati? Zon Momomaru stood behind him, and behind Zon Momomaru, there was a row of pacifists like Uncle Bear. Suppressing the pirate supernova and grabbing headlines with them, isn't it a very important thing? Lucas turned to face Momomaru and smiled. Looking at the pacifists, I really don't understand what Shang did this for. Could it be that someday in the future, he will be able to regain his consciousness, and fight with the rebels inside and outside, and Kaba twisted Celestial Dragon's neck with a cry? If it can't, then what is the point of Dorag, the Birdman's arrangement like this? No matter how willing Shichibukai is to cooperate with the world government, it is impossible to get important information. Why do these media always like to report on pirates? Sanji said angrily. Yeah, I'm overwhelmed, hey. Lucas sighed bitterly, missing the media coverage of his news many years ago. Quote. Zon Dao Maru had nothing to say. This guy borrowed him just because he wiped out a few newcomers. Without Luffy the pirate, no one played Celestial Dragons. Lucas expressed regret for this. When Yan Yuan did not come, Supernova expressed his heartache. Boom. The warship fired at the pirate ship on the shore. Lucas's eyes lit up. Wonderful, Kizaru's trick of pretending to be B had been stolen by him. Stepping on the foot, the whole person rushed out. Stepping on the cannonball, Lucas came in a gesture of reaching out and looking far away. Advertisement. This guy, Sabayati Archipelago, in the alley. Trafalgar Law hides inside, secretly watching Lucas falling from the sky. Okay, so handsome. Quote. Luo and the other crew members looked at Beibo strangely, that something was wrong with you. Go. After all, Luo quickly led the crew to the place where they stopped. When he was young, he had seen Lucas many times. He doesn't want to run into this guy now. Lucas left the cannonball and landed on the moonwalk steadily. The shell hit a pirate ship on the shore and instantly blew up that ship, leaving a cloud of flames behind. A group of pirates rushed over with their swords up, glaring at Lucas. Kang. Draw a knife. Lucas directly hit the group of pirates with a huge horizontal slash, the slashing wave tore the body of each pirate, and it passed in a flash. Puff puff. The trash fish in front of him was cleared. Bang. Lucas stepped under his feet, rushed out, and jumped quickly on the roof of one of the rooms. Leave Rocinante, a lonely old man, who became a pirate himself. You guys owe you a fight. Quote. Trafalgar Law stopped quickly, staring cautiously at Lucas who suddenly stood in front of him. Beibo behind Luo looked at the person blocking him, and gave Lucas a non-standard white crane with wings. You are the juggling troupe. Lucas couldn't help laughing. Room. As soon as Luo shouted the name of the skill, Lucas disappeared. He quickly looked around. How is Rocinante? Luo drew a knife and turned around, but the person behind him disappeared instantly. Chapter 289,287. Hawkins, let me try how many lives you have. Advertisement. Luo looked around angrily, but still did not find the man. This guy actually treated him as a child, and rubbed his head just before he didn't react. This kid. In the distance, Lucas stood on the roof and turned to leave. Rocinante did not interfere with what Luo's future is going to do. Lucas just used to tease each other. Let me Kang, what other supernova? Lucas quickly jumped on the roof, rushed to the trunk of a red tree, and looked around. On the street, the pacifists came one after another, facing the pirates, opened their mouths one by one and fired lasers. Toby, who is offering a bounty of 23 million Baileys, has been subdued. The pacifists raised their hands and aimed at the pirate boys. 2 lasers fired with 2 bangs, and the hit pirate fell to the ground with smoke. Each pacifist fired a laser at each pirate. Although compared with Kizaru, the power is all reduced, these pirates are not opponents at all. Boom. The pacifists aimed at Hawkins and fired a laser. Ah! A scream came, and Hawkins calmly glanced at the tragic death beside him, and a scarecrow fell out of his body. What's going on? On the other street, one by one Marine looked at himself and others. These people either became children or old people. Anyway, all the legs and feet are inconvenient. Bonnie squatted on the roof and laughed at these hapless guys. Tisk tusk, it's delicious. What? Pony turned her head, Lucas was standing behind her, and all of her men were kicked down. Hole. Pony reached out to touch Lucas's body, trying to turn the B************* D into an old man. Snapped. The knife in Lucas's hand came out, and the knife slapped Pony's face, directly slapped the woman into the air. On moonwalk, Lucas kicked Pony in the stomach, kicking the woman of mystery age down. Boom. Pony lost his movement and lay in the ruins. Ba, Wu Ding Shang, Si Ku La Chi Manapu Shen Ti Wudong, Dan Nong Jie Gang Chin Yakai, Chi Ta Bu Wei Wa Zuo La Chi, Zochu Dai Gon De Yinla. Scratch disc cut. Puff. A bloody severed arm flew up, and Colonel Marine, who was attacked by ARP, fell to the ground in pain, constantly wailing. Scraper. Puff puff. Lucas rushed to ARP in an instant and kicked his funny piano teeth. Advertisement. Vaguely, Hawkins saw a few piano keys flying down with blood in the sunlight. A puff of blood came out of Apu's mouth, and Lucas kicked his face with his foot. Call out. Apu's face turned crooked, the man was kicked off, and a cracked hole was knocked out on the ground. Puff, puff. Apulian vomited 2 mouthfuls of blood, and saw a figure falling from the sky. Boom. Lucas stepped on ARP's body, and ARP fainted and was seriously injured. Apu was already ugly, but now his face is crooked and even uglier. Quick, it's Admiral. Hawkins stared at Lucas, and kept moving backwards. With such a good chance of pretending to be B, he should leave it to Yoroj. Lucas stepped on the shave and rushed out instantly until Hawkins. Too fast. Hawkins looked at Lucas, who disappeared in horror. Kizaru is faster, but Kizaru releases the sea. As Lucas looked now, he couldn't see the point of letting water out at all. Trafalgar Law. Thank you for letting go. Puff. Hawkins didn't have a chance to react at all, and was hit by a knife. However, I am not that easy to die. Hawkins smiled confidently. A hapless little brother behind him fell to the ground and died suddenly. Let me try. How much do you have to die for? Lucas turned his back to the sun and raised the long knife in his hand. The sun was very warm, but at this time Hawkins' heart was cold. Puff puff. Yoroj stared at Lucas and Hawkins, stabbing the knife vigorously, dropping the scarecrow from the vigorous body, and killing my little brother. Pony had already been carried away by his younger brother. And Yoroj stood here to fight the pacifists without fear, taking a look at him from time to time. When did Hawkins die? Are you still going to die? Quote. Hawkins kept backing away, wiping his cold sweat, and moved closer to Yoroj and Drake. Room. Luo appeared behind Lucas and slashed at Lucas with a knife. He was still a little unwilling, and wanted to try how big the gap between himself and this man was. Kang. Lucas didn't turn around, holding the knife with his right hand and turning behind him, with the long knife lying across his back, blocking Luo's attack. You are too tender. What? Boom. Advertisement. Lucas turned around and kicked Luo's chin. Luo was kicked and thrown back. Lucas chased him up and kicked Luo's stomach. Luo was kicked directly by him for more than 10 meters. Wow. Luo fell to the ground, spat out blood, looked at Lucas unwillingly. A chopping wave was chopped out by Lucas, breaking a mangrove tree. Rumble. The mangrove fell between the two in an instant. The Lord Rod brothers hurriedly pulled him and ran away. This kid. Lucas shook his head, then turned to look at the others. This guy. Hawkins turned into a huge scarecrow with 5-inch nails and stared at Lucas vigilantly. What are you going to see for? Quote. Forget it, I'm too lazy to ask. Lucas instantly accelerated, rushed behind Hawkins, and decapitated his head. Puff. A little brother of Hawkins died tragically. Tisk tusk, it's too unlucky to be your little brother. Lucas sighed and slashed again. He wants to see, this kid still has a few lives. It is said that the cat has 9 lives, but if you leave it on the train track, will the 9 lives be enough? Hawkins faced Lucas, completely unstoppable, just like the cat of 9 lives falling off the track, frightened. Yoroj, who was knocked down by the pacifists, stood up, his figure soaring and huge. Boom. He flew the pacifist with a punch, then rushed over and punched Lucas. What a big man. Lucas drew away, then increased his strength and hit Yoroj with a punch. Ah! Yoroj screamed in pain and flew out, crashing through houses and disappearing. Monster. Drake stepped back, exclaiming. Lucas pierced Hawkins' forehead with a single knife, and Hawkins finally died this time. Boom. Falling to the ground, Hawkins' bright red blood stained the ground red. Lucas turned to look. Drake had already run away. When North Blue rounded up Doflamingo, Drake was also a kid from where he ran. He had heard of Lucas's record on the warship. Lucas waved to Marine who came behind him, jumped on the roof, jumped quickly, and came to Yoroj. Can your wings fly? Quote. The error-free chapters of One Piece Admiral will continue to be updated on Sushu.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend Sushu.com.